Chapter 22. The Seven Windows. The ravine was dead quiet, just the wind rustling leaves overhead and the low buzz of insects nearby. Mark crouched low among the ferns, knees pressed into the mossy ground, his hands trembling slightly as he activated the third gizmo. What shimmered before him wasn't just a control panel, it was a window to the unfathomable. The holographic interface flared to life. Circles appeared under the seven glyphs like tiny glowing peepholes, each about the size of a quarter. He leaned closer, breath fogging the cool, bright surface. And then he saw them. Worlds on the other side. Each circle showed a different landscape, fleeting but clear, as if staring through a knothole into someone else's world. One showed a crimson desert, with two suns bleeding light across endless dunes. Another revealed a floating archipelago suspended in twilight, its islands chained together by vines that sparkled with bioluminescence. A third showed a forest of black trees, each one moving ever so slightly, not in the wind, but as if they were breathing. The fourth was water, endless, glittering, impossibly still. But what froze him were the last three circles. Because unlike the others, which glowed orange, these two glowed a deep, pulsating blue. And what he saw through them made his chest tighten. One seemed to show a metallic hallway, familiar in its design, like the ship he had snuck into. The other showed a clearing. His clearing. The one with the table and the cages. Why those three? He recoiled slightly, mind racing. Were these links? Active gateways? Were they still open? Watching? Recording? Or were these peepholes just reflections, like bookmarks left by the aliens, marking where they had been, or intended to return? Why did only these three glow differently? Did it mean danger or proximity? Mark's fingers hovered over the interface, terrified to press anything, terrified not to. He whispered aloud, voice barely audible. "What are you trying to show me?" No reply. Just the low hum of a device that wasn't his. But now it was. And this secret was unfolding faster than he ever imagined. Through the glyph gate, the air around the glyph shimmered, bending light like heat above asphalt. Then, with a low hum that buzzed in Mark's ribcage, the portal bloomed open. It was identical to the one he'd seen in the forest. The same churning swirl of colors, both vibrant and wrong, like a kaleidoscope built from another language. Mark's breath caught. His reflection rippled on the portal's surface like it was made of water and glass and light all at once. He stood there, frozen in the rustling hush of the ravine. His fingers clenched tighter around the gizmo. What's waiting on the other side this time? Another jungle? A cliff? A void? For a split second he considered turning back, but instead, he stepped forward, the cross-world threshold. As soon as his foot passed the boundary, everything changed. The wind vanished. His ears popped. And then he was through. The landscape around him was unlike anything he'd seen. Mountains soared like jagged spires in the distance. Floating islands drifted lazily in the sky above, casting shadows that shimmered with hues no human eye was ever meant to decode. The air felt denser, heavier, but charged, like breathing electricity and fog all at once. Vegetation bloomed in impossible shapes, tendrils that grew in corkscrews, trees with translucent leaves that refracted light in rainbow patterns. The horizon stretched in strange angles, as if gravity had different opinions here. Mark turned in place, wide-eyed. He wasn't in the Amazon. He wasn't on Earth. Whatever this place was, this glyph had taken him to another world. He felt the hum of the gizmo beneath his hand, waiting. This was only one of 7, and he had just begun to scratch the surface. Mark felt anxiety, the type of anxiety that quickly turns into fear. The living world beyond. Mark took a cautious step, but the ground beneath his feet shivered, like skin rippling under muscle. The surface wasn't soil. It was some kind of living, pulsating moss. Bioluminescent threads woven through it in faint blue veins. He crouched and touched it lightly. The moment his fingertips made contact, The ground twitched and sighed, as if the planet itself was breathing. Then, rustling. From the tangled growth nearby, a pack of strange creatures burst into view. They were the size of foxes, but iridescent, with elongated hind legs and wide prismatic eyes that blinked horizontally. Their skin shimmered like liquid metal, and their forked tails flicked wildly behind them. One paused just long enough to lock eyes with Mark before bolting again, fear etched in its every movement. Mark took a step back. Then the shadow fell. He craned his neck upward and felt his breath freeze. Gliding overhead was a colossal creature, like some unholy fusion of manta ray and eagle, its wings translucent and veined with pulsing light. Its body was lined with what looked like gills that shimmered open and closed as it flew. And its face, if you could call it that, had 3 triangular eyes arranged in a spiral, scanning the land below. He dared not move. Even breathing felt like a risk. But the beast didn't spot him. It veered toward the horizon with a low reverberating cry, something between a whale's song and a thunderclap. Mark wasted no time. He turned and sprinted, flinging himself through the still open portal. Back to Earth, new truth in hand. The ravine greeted him with stillness. The trees stood unmoving, the air no longer vibrated. But Mark's heart was racing. Now he knew. This wasn't just a fancy viewing device. It was a teleporter. A gateway to other ecosystems, other realities, other corners of the universe. How it functioned, he had no clue. But how he felt about it? Obsessed. This wasn't just about recovery anymore. This was discovery. And he wouldn't stop until he knew everything. A second chance at discovery. Mark paced in the ravine, his pulse still hammering from the encounter. The creatures, the landscape, the sheer enormity of what he had seen. And yet, he had nothing to prove it. Not a single picture. It bothered him, failing to document the experience. He had held the moment in his hands and let it slip away, lost forever in memory alone. But going back wasn't an option, at least not anytime soon. Not with that winged predator circling above like it owned the sky. Choosing the next door, Mark turned back to the gizmo, fingers hovering over the glowing glyphs. 7 choices. 7 windows to the unknown. This time, he wouldn't rush in blindly. He scanned the peepholes carefully, looking for something safer, a place quiet, stable, without looming shadows or stalking creatures. One stood out. Through its shimmering surface, he saw a vast, open plateau, golden fields stretching endlessly beneath a warm orange sky. No beasts, no movement, no looming threats. It looked peaceful. The step forward. Mark took a slow breath, steadying himself. He had already crossed one threshold. One world. Now he was about to cross another. This time, he wouldn't make the same mistake. This time, he would document everything. And with that thought, he pressed the glyph and stepped forward, into the next unknown with his phone in hand and the photo app ready. A portal to the wild. The moment Mark stepped through the portal, the air changed. Gone was the dry crispness of the ravine, replaced by a wall of heat and moisture, the unmistakable wet breath of deep jungle. The air was alive with calls, chirping, howling, buzzing. The smell of earth and blooming vegetation clung to him, thick and ancient. For a terrifying moment, he thought he might have crossed into another planet. Until he saw the monkeys and the jaguar. Earth, but untamed. The monkeys screeched and scattered overhead, vanishing into the emerald canopy in a frantic blur of fur and noise. Then, silent as shadow, a jaguar emerged, sleek, amber-eyed, muscles rippling beneath its rosette-spotted coat. It didn't look at Mark, not directly, but he could feel it, like a tension string stretched tight between them. He barely breathed. Click. He snapped 3 pictures, maybe 4, hands trembling, but steady enough to frame the moment. Not just of the jaguar. Of the portal itself, glowing like a tear in the fabric of space just behind him, a doorway suspended in jungle mist. The cautious retreat. Mark didn't run, didn't sprint. He backed up slow, eyes locked on the jungle predator, every primal instinct roaring inside his chest. Then he turned and slipped back through the portal. Back to the ravine, back to the mystery. The ravine welcomed him like nothing had changed. The insects buzzed, the wind rustled the treetops. But everything had changed. Because now Mark had confirmed it. This portal, these glyphs, they were transportation systems, not just across planets, but across Earth itself. Shortcuts, hidden paths, maybe even surveillance nodes, and two of the peepholes were still glowing blue. Mark stared at the portal as it shimmered behind him, then winked shut. There were 5 more glyphs to explore, and each one could lead somewhere beautiful, dangerous, or utterly unknown. But now he wasn't just guessing. Now he was navigating. The frostbitten gateway. The moment Mark stepped through, the cold hit him like a hammer. Not a breeze, not a chill. A full-force Arctic wind. His breath froze mid-exhale, the shock stealing the air straight from his lungs. His thin summer clothes did nothing against the razor-sharp gusts swirling through the landscape. A world of ice. He squinted through the frigid air, barely able to keep his eyes open against the brightness. Stretching before him was an endless frozen expanse, flat in some places, jagged with towering ice formations in others. The sky above was an eerie shade of deep indigo, almost unnatural, with streaks of shifting colors, auroras, but unlike any Earth had ever seen. Were they really on Earth? Or had he stepped into a different kind of frozen wasteland, one untouched by human feet? A picture before the retreat. A moment caught in ice Mark stumbled backward, his breath coming in rapid bursts, barely visible in the frozen air. His hands burned with cold, the phone screen shaking between his fingers. The image was there, captured, proof of the place he had just stepped into, locked in pixels. But he couldn't stay. Not like this. He turned sharply and threw himself toward the portal, each movement feeling sluggish, weighed down by the unnatural freeze creeping into his muscles. 1 step, 2, then he was through. Back to Earth, back to the mystery. The warmth of the ravine rushed over him, the contrast so overwhelming that it felt like stepping into an entirely different world, not just physically but mentally. Mark doubled over, rubbing his hands together, trying to shake off the sting of the cold that still clung to his skin. His heart raced. His mind spun. This wasn't just some random feature of the gizmo. It was designed to transport. Across time, across space, across dimensions. How far could it reach? And why did some of the peepholes still glow blue? The next move. Mark exhaled slowly, fingers trembling as he unlocked his phone. The image. There it was. The frozen wasteland. The indigo sky. The towering ice formations that looked too perfect, too alien, too intentional. He had proof. And now, he had questions. The second the portal blinked shut behind him, warmth rushed over his body, the bite of the Arctic wind finally gone. Mark hunched over, rubbing his hands together, waiting for feeling to return to his fingertips. His heart raced. His breath was uneven. But he knew, without a doubt, what he had just learned. This gizmo didn't just transport him to places, it transported him to extremes. Hidden in ice and light, Mark squinted at his phone screen, scrolling between the image's sharp details, his breath slow and steady. The cold had nearly robbed him of the chance to document the place, but now that he had, he needed to make it count. Then, he saw it. At first, it seemed like just another ice formation, a jagged, gleaming spire rising in the distance. But zooming in, adjusting the contrast, it wasn't ice. It was metal. A structure, a signal, a secret buried within the frozen wasteland stood something unnatural, towering, smooth, with edges too precise to be anything but designed. No signs of collapse, no weathering. It wasn't a ruin, but something functional, something active. Mark held his breath, his fingers tightening around his phone. At the top of the structure, faint but undeniable, a blinking light pulsed. A pattern, a rhythm. Not random. Intentional. Who built it? And why? If the portal had sent him to another planet, this meant life. If it had sent him somewhere on Earth, this meant someone had been here first. Either way, someone, or something, was sending a signal. But to who? Next, Mark swallowed hard, his mind racing. Could this be a beacon? A transmitter? An outpost from something that wasn't human? Or worse, was it watching? Whatever the case, he needed answers. And now that he had proof, he wasn't just experimenting anymore. He was investigating. A return to the unknown. Mark hovered at the edge of the portal, his heartbeat hammering in his ears. This wasn't just any passage. It was the same energy, the same eerie glow from that fateful night in the woods. His gut twisted with anticipation. Was he really about to step onto the ship again? The emptiness beyond the vortex pulled at him. A promise, a warning. But curiosity, as always, won. He stepped forward. The ghost ship. The moment Mark crossed the threshold, the metallic floor hummed beneath his feet, absorbing his weight like liquid stone. The air was sterile, impossibly still, humming with a low vibration that seemed to settle in his bones. But something was wrong. The cages, gone. No barriers, no captured creatures, no eerie containment fields flickering against the walls. Just silence, just absence, just more questions. Why had it changed? Mark ran a hand along the sleek surface of a nearby console. Was the ship abandoned? Was it expecting him? He looked around for any trace of movement, a signal, a shift, anything. But the space remained unnervingly vacant. Had he stumbled upon the wrong moment in time? Or worse, had they known he had seen them before and erased all traces? The next decision. Mark swallowed hard, pulse quickening. This was an opportunity. A place he had only seen from the outside, now open before him. But with no visible threat, no immediate danger, did he dare explore? Search for answers? Or did he turn back before something unseen noticed he was here? The threshold between discovery and preparation. The portal winked shut, its swirling glow dissolving into nothingness like ink vanishing in water. Mark exhaled sharply, his breath uneven from excitement, frustration, and the sheer weight of what he had just experienced. He had been inside the ship, but he had no tools, no second gizmo, no proper plan. This wasn't something he could afford to approach half-prepared. The return to familiar ground. As he trekked back toward home, the world around him felt smaller, the trees more ordinary, the sky less vast, the ground solid beneath his feet in a way that no longer seemed impressive. But his mind was anything but small. It was alive, buzzing with calculations, strategies, what-ifs. If the aliens had been observing humanity, for how long, and why? Were they collectors, explorers, something more dangerous? The answers wouldn't come from hesitation. They would come from action. The plan, before the next leap, back in his room, Mark spread his gizmos on his desk like puzzle pieces, their glowing interfaces reflecting against his knuckles. He needed everything at his disposal. All 3 devices, fully studied and mapped. Backup tools. Something to document, analyze, test. A strategy, because stepping onto that ship blind again wouldn't cut it. This was no longer just about unlocking portals. This was about understanding what lay beyond them. And when the time came to step back into the unknown, he would be ready. The adventure was just beginning. Mark stared at the gizmo, fingers hovering over its interface. Not tonight, but soon. And next time, he wasn't just stepping through portals. He was diving into something bigger than himself. Something huge. Something that could change everything.